Before the myth, before the movies, before the theme parks, there was a man who braided slow-burning cannon fuses into his beard and walked into battle wreathed in smoke. Not for theatrics, for psychological terror. He wanted his enemies to believe that they were looking at the devil himself, and it worked. Ships surrendered without firing a shot. Crews dropped to their knees. Governors cut deals they were ashamed of. Edward Teach didn't just rob ships. He broke men's minds. And the way he died, just as ugly, just as violent, and just as real. His origins are genuinely murky. Bristol, England is the most cited birthplace, but no baptism record has ever been confirmed. This was common. Men reinvented themselves at sea. What we know is that he likely served aboard privateer vessels during Queen Anne's War between 1701 and 1713. He operated out of Jamaica. It was legal piracy, crown sanctioned. He was already trained before he turned outlaw. The transition from privateer to pirate was not dramatic. When the war ended, the letters of marque dried up. Thousands of sailors were dumped onto the docks with no pay, no pension, no options. The line between privateer and pirate had always been thin. Now there was no line at all. He came under Benjamin Hornigold around 1716. Hornigold ran one of the most disciplined pirate operations of the era out of Nassau, which was a lawless port that had become the de facto pirate republic. Teach wasn't a nobody who lucked into command. He was recognized, he was mentored, and ultimately he was promoted. By 1717, Hornigold handed Teach command of a captured sloop, and that is significant. It means that men trusted him. It means he had a reputation before the beard ever became famous. And the name, Blackbeard, almost certainly came before the notoriety. It was a descriptive nickname, the kind sailors used all the time. But he understood its power and leaned into it hard. The fuses in the beard, this is documented. Captain Charles Johnson's A Great General History of Pirates in 1724 describes the slow match fuses tied into his hair and beard, lit before boarding actions. The sulfurous smoke curled around his face, combined with a large frame, crossed bandoliers carrying multiple pistols, and a cutlass. He engineered a specific image. This was deliberate psychological warfare, not vanity. He rarely needed to kill. The terror was the weapon. The majority of his captures were bloodless because crews surrendered immediately. This was rational. Resist a pirate and you risked death. Surrender and you were usually ransomed or released. Teach weaponized that calculation. The Queen Anne's Revenge, his flagship, was a French slaver captured in late 1717. He had refitted her with 40 guns. A 40-gun warship was a serious naval asset. He wasn't running a raiding skiff, he was commanding a small fleet. The blockade of Charlestown in May 1718 is one of the most audacious acts in the entire Golden Age. He bottled up the harbor of one of the most important colonial ports in North America for nearly a week. He ransomed passengers from captured ships. You know what he was demanding? A chest of medicine. Not gold, medicine. Which suggests his crew was suffering from syphilis. Even in his ransoms, there's grim practicality. He operated with a working relationship with Charles Eden, the governor of North Carolina. He accepted bribes and legitimized some of Teach's prizes through the Admiralty Court. Piracy at this level was not separate from government. It was entangled with it. He reportedly married a young woman in Bath, North Carolina, his 14th wife, according to Johnson, but that number is probably exaggerated for effect. The marriage itself, performed by Governor Eden, was real enough. He was attempting a kind of domestic normalcy while simultaneously terrorizing the Atlantic coast. That tension is not incidental. It tells you something about who he was. There's no confirmed account of Teach murdering a member of his own crew or torturing prisoners as sport, behavior attributed freely to men like Charles Vane. He was violent and dangerous, but the demonic sadism of the legend appears to be largely a construction. Fear-based propaganda, printed after his death, served the colonial authorities who wanted piracy framed as an irredeemable evil. His crew had a working democratic structure, common on pirate vessels of the era. Shares were distributed by vote. The quartermaster acted as a check on the captain's power. Teach commanded a crew of free men, many of whom had chosen this life as the only available alternative to poverty, impressment, or servitude. He wasn't stupid. He accepted a pardon under the Act of Grace in 1718. He used the legal breathing room to refit, then returned to sea. He understood the game. He was playing multiple sides simultaneously: the crown, the colonial governors, and his own crew. The mythology around him exploded after his death. The man himself was careful, calculating, and strategic. The monster was built in printing houses. Lieutenant Robert Maynard was sent by Governor Alexander Spotswood of Virginia, not North Carolina, specifically because Eden was in Teach's pocket. Spotswood funded the expedition partially out of his own pocket and acted without clear legal jurisdiction. He wanted Teach dead, not captured. That tells you how threatened the colonial establishment felt. Maynard sailed 2 small sloops into Ocracoke Inlet at dawn. Teach had around 20 men. Maynard had around 60 across both vessels. It was not a fair fight, not in the numbers anyways. But Ocracoke's shallow waters neutralized larger warships. Teach had chosen his anchorage deliberately. The fight was savage. Teach's crew opened with a broadside that killed or wounded a significant portion of Maynard's men. Maynard ordered the survivors below decks, leaving the deck apparently empty. Teach's crew boarded, and then Maynard's men came up. Close quarters, blades, pistols. Teach and Maynard fought hand to hand. According to contemporary accounts, Teach was shot 5 times and cut more than 20 before he went down. He kept fighting. Whether that's exact or a little embellished, the core of it, that he did not die easily, appears consistent across multiple accounts. Maynard had Teach's head cut off and hung from the bowsprit of his sloop for the return voyage to Bath. The body was thrown overboard. No grave, no monument, just a severed head, displaced and then displayed like a trophy. Because the authorities needed people to see it. They needed the terror to be overtly visible. That alone tells you how much he'd frightened them. He existed at a specific hinge point in history, when the Atlantic world was being reorganized by empire. Trade and naval forces and men who had been useful to that project were being discarded. He was a product of that system and then its enemy. The legend consumed the man almost immediately. Within 6 years of dying, Johnson's book had already turned him into a myth. What you see in every film, novel, and game is Johnson's Blackbeard, not Teach's. The distinction matters if you care about what the Golden Age actually was. He wasn't a hero. He was not a villain in a comic book sense. He was violent, he was intelligent, he was adaptable. He was operating in a violent and chaotic world. And he survived longer than most by being better at than almost anyone else. For writers, for readers, for anyone drawn to this period, the real Teach is more useful and more interesting than the myth. A man who lit fuses in his own beard to look like the devil is already stranger than fiction. You don't need to exaggerate him, you need to understand him. If this period pulls at you, the real history, not the theme park version. I write historical fiction set deep in the Golden Age. The brutality and the politics, the everyday life, and some wild characters. Check it out at www.chrissterling.com. If this video was useful, subscribe. There's more where it came from. Thank you.